Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. It is Wednesday, June 25th, and this is Sportscaster.com's Open Mic. I'm your host, Johnny Kane. This is a show where we cover a wide range of topics involving sports on every level. Not your traditional sports talk radio, but more long-form interviews with athletes, coaches, other industry leaders to provide a deeper perspective. And the commentary you'll hear tonight over the next hour comes from the next generation of aspiring young broadcasters. On tonight's show, we'll discuss a landmark legal case that just settled. It's really going to change the way college athletics operate with respect to paying athletes. We'll also hear from an icon in women's professional hockey, that being Madison Packer, recently retired, but one of the best players of her generation, who's from Birmingham, Michigan. In addition to that, we'll hear from Lorenzo Panilli after his record-setting performance in the Michigan Amateur Golf Tournament. Panilli, one of the top rising young golfers in the state, who attends Michigan State. But we begin with the NBA draft, which is taking place tonight in Brooklyn. And here to kick off the show is Carter Lutz, student at the University of Miami, who is plugged in on the NBA scene. Carter, good to have you back.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. You can feel the energy for the draft in the air as I stand on the New York City streets, but it's coming up. People are excited about it, and we're right back into it after finishing the finals, which was last night, but whenever this airs, a week ago or so.
Yeah, I was going to mention Carter Lutz joining us live on location from New York. The NBA draft is taking place in Brooklyn, not far from where you are. But what did you think about the finals? Game 7 with the Pacers and Oklahoma City Thunder. I thought it was a fabulous series. What was your takeaway?
I think the overall sense around the series is that people are pleased with it because going into it, you're not sure what to expect. You have two franchises that have never won it, two teams that really haven't been in contention like that in the past couple of years, two young teams. And so there was a lot of uncertainty with it. But for the series to go 7, you couldn't be happier about that. There hasn't been a 7-game series in 9 years since 2016. They had a lot of hype to live up to. And of course, Tyrese Haliburton going down with that injury changes the outcome. And I personally believe the Pacers would have pulled that game out if they had him, and it would have made for a better game. But you know what? They didn't. The Thunder were the best team all season long. They probably deserve this championship. But personally, I'm pleased with it, and I think a lot of NBA fans would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I thought the Thunder, obviously I covered the NBA pretty intimately throughout the season, covering the Detroit Pistons. And, we saw the Thunder twice. And in my opinion, in my eyes, I thought they were the best team in the NBA, in the association this year. But again, we get to the postseason, you just never know. But the one thing about it is the way that team was built, they've been built on draft capital. 3 years ago, they were bottom feeders in the association, and now are hanging a banner. So, it does provide hope about how quickly things can turn. And we've seen that in Detroit, right? I mean, they tripled their win total from a season ago. You were in the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference, and you say, well, how far away are they from contending for an NBA championship? And I think more than anything, what we saw with teams like Indiana and Oklahoma City getting all the way there, you say, hey, it can happen for anybody. It can happen for a team like the Pistons.
Agreed. I think the Thunder are the perfect example of how to build a contending team in the NBA in this era, and they just showed it on the court. And I have to say, I felt devastated for those Pacers fans yesterday because if you think about it, that Knicks-Pistons series, it feels like such a long time ago. And to be stuck with the team, for a month and a half, I think that's how long the playoffs are. You're bumping and grinding in these playoffs and nail biting and all of the above, and it's devastating when you get that far and you can't capitalize. So shout out to all the fans that stuck with these teams throughout the playoffs because it's a long playoff season.
Yeah, it's a marathon. There's no question. It's like a second season entirely.
Yeah.
The Thunder actually have the 15th and 24th overall picks. The Pistons don't have a first-round pick this year. They'll draft 37th. That was a pick that they acquired in a trade with the Dallas Mavericks. And speaking of the Mavericks, the way the NBA draft lottery played out, the Mavs, who obviously made headlines with the Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis trade, the Mavericks end up with the first overall pick. In your opinion, is there any chance they don't go Cooper Flagg, number 1 overall?
I think it's as surefire as LeBron to the Cavaliers in 2003. I think there's no other route you can go unless you wanted to trade the pick, but we know they're not doing that after they made a trade earlier in the season. But yeah, Cooper Flagg will be a Maverick, and I mean, he's a seriously hyped up prospect. The biggest, obviously, there was Wembanyama a few years ago, but other than that, he's up there.
Yeah, I think that's just it, right? You look at over the years, like who are some of the great, are they generational talents? LeBron, obviously generational talent. Zion Williamson was perceived as a generational talent, although obviously injuries have kind of plagued his legacy. But Cooper Flagg is the next best thing in the NBA. The Mavs have the first overall pick. The Spurs have the second pick in this year's draft. The Spurs obviously have Wemby. They have De'Aaron Fox. It'll be interesting to see what they do. They obviously have a coaching change with Greg Popovich stepping down after forever. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I will say this. It was recently announced that the Pistons will play the Dallas Mavericks in Mexico City on November 1st this year. So they're going to play the Mexico City game. So if they do get Cooper Flagg, this new look Mavs team, that'll be fun to see the Pistons play them abroad. Again, that's coming up in November. So, in addition to Flagg, a couple other names that we'll see, I think, in the first couple of picks. Rutgers has a couple of guys: Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey. Harper's a true guard. Ace Bailey's kind of a combo guard, but he could play small forward. VJ Edgecombe from Baylor, he's a combo guard, and then Con Knippel, maybe the second best player behind Cooper Flagg from Duke. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Again, first round of the NBA draft is tonight. The second round will be coming up tomorrow. And Matt O'Brien is a part of the Sportscaster program, very knowledgeable about the game. You can find him on social media under the handle Boston Buckets, if that tells you anything about the team he likes to root for. I will say that when we recorded with Matt, it was a couple days before the Kevin Durant trade to the Houston Rockets news broke. Now, that trade won't become official until early July. And it was also recorded just before Oklahoma City won the NBA championship on Sunday night over the Indiana Pacers. So keep that in mind as you listen. But otherwise, thoughtful commentary on this year's NBA draft from Matt O'Brien.
Yeah, good stuff from Matt, and I'm excited to tune in. You talked about the Rutgers duo that is going to go in the top 5, I believe. And it was pretty interesting. I was just kind of sitting there laughing to myself almost when the commercial came on for the draft. While the finals was going on, you hear about these Rutgers players. We didn't see them that much during the season. They didn't even make the tournament. So that tells you a lot about where the NBA is at in their prospect rankings and how they view these guys. And then you talked about the Spurs as well, which is super interesting because it feels like they're a team that's in line to make a move and to make a trade. And they're sitting there at number 2 in the draft. Years prior, we've seen, a clear-cut number 2, number 3 prospect. This year, it's a little bit more up in the air. So the Spurs could definitely be a trade candidate in my eyes. There's not a clear-cut guy for someone to go get at number 2, but moves are made in the NBA offseason. I think this is going to be one of the most electric offseasons. You started off with Kevin Durant getting traded. We've seen it before, but it doesn't happen too often. So I'm excited to see how it goes down. And draft night is lining up to be a fun one and to have a couple surprises in there for sure.
All right. Well, hey, man, I really appreciate you joining us live on the streets in New York. That is Carter Lutz from the University of Miami, who's part of the Sportscaster program. Also mention this, we'll see how draft night plays out, but with Kevin Durant going to Houston, keep in mind also Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's signed with the Bucks through the 27-28 season, but as we know, Milwaukee exploring the options of moving Giannis in light of the Damian Lillard Achilles injury, which would keep him likely out for all of this coming season. So there's a lot of variables, a lot of moving parts. It's going to be compelling theater watching the NBA draft unfold. So without further ado, here's Matt O'Brien with his NBA draft commentary.
All right, guys, we're going to be talking about the NBA draft. And when we're talking about this year's draft, we absolutely need to start with the number 1 overall pick. Crazy draft lottery. It falls to the Dallas Mavericks. They had the lowest odds in the lottery to get this pick. And that's pretty crazy because they were in the play-in. They could have made the playoffs. So pretty crazy that they end up with the number 1 pick because a lot of people would argue that they were pretty close to contending. They have a lot of good players. They've got Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson kind of on the way out, but still pretty good option. And now they have the chance to add a really great prospect. And we're pretty confident in who that prospect's going to be. The number 1 overall pick should be Cooper Flagg. This guy has been expected to be the number 1 pick since before he even went to college. He did go to Duke last season and he had a pretty stellar season, so he's really locked in at that number 1 spot. And what is pretty crazy about this Dallas Mavericks team is people think they might trade out of this number 1 pick. There's a lot of talks of them moving to try to get a contending player. And I don't know if that's the best move for them. I don't know if you should trade away from a great prospect like Cooper Flagg, but it could happen. Another thing that we're looking at in this draft is other trade madness. So the number 2 pick is possessed by the San Antonio Spurs. And we know that the San Antonio Spurs have a very good roster. They have Victor Wembanyama. They just acquired De'Aaron Fox this past season. And they have a pretty stacked roster, and they're ready to compete. They want to use Victor Wembanyama's years to the best of their ability. So we know that they're going to be looking to trade either this number 2 pick, and they also possess the number 14 pick for one of the 2 big stars on the market, that being Kevin Durant and Giannis Antetokounmpo. So we're not sure who they're going to be going for. There's a lot of talks that KD is pretty much solidified as a Spur already, and realistically, I think they would trade the 14th pick for KD, but they wouldn't trade the number 2 pick for him. That's a little bit high value. But if they are going to try to trade for Giannis, that's where they would trade the number 2 pick. But pretty interesting, if they do trade the 14th overall pick for KD, they still possess that number 2 pick. So the Spurs could be very dangerous next season. Another really interesting thing about this draft lottery is that some of the worst teams fell out of the top 3. Our top 3 is the Mavericks, the Spurs, and the Philadelphia 76ers, who are all pretty decent rosters. And our 4, 5, 6 picks go Hornets, Jazz, and Wizards, who are all pretty awful. So it's pretty interesting to see that the worst teams are not going to be getting the best players. And I don't really know if this is necessarily good or bad for the league. I think it is exciting to see that some of the best teams are going to get better. And I think that's what the league kind of wants. But it is kind of interesting that some of these bad teams are going to continue to be bad because they're not getting the best prospects. And another really important thing about this draft is the Oklahoma City Thunder. And they have pick 15 and pick 24. So they're going to be getting even deeper in this draft. And we know about the Oklahoma City Thunder is that they have more first rounders in the years coming. So they're going to be super scary. And they have a lot of options they could do in this draft. With pick 15 and 24, they could trade up, get a higher pick. They could trade out of the draft and get other really solid prospects. And it's pretty scary that they're already this good and they're going to be getting better this offseason.
Again, that was Sportscaster.com's Matt O'Brien. NBA draft taking place tonight. Pistons don't own a first-round pick this year, so they'll make the 37th overall pick in round 2, which takes place tomorrow. When we come back, the landmark case that will transform college athletics as we know it. You're listening to Open Mic on WJR.